What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today, sadly enough, the Eruptor has been nerfed. Now, last week there was a patch that implemented a change to ricochet that basically, anytime you had a ricochet of one of your rounds, it would instantly come back to the Helldiver that shot it, and they were having an issue with the Eruptor where shrapnel was basically doing this and instantly deleting Helldivers. So they decided that they were going to implement a fix by taking the shrapnel out of this weapon and just buffing the damage up and creating an explosive radius out of this round. Now, sadly enough, when I first saw this as the details as to what they were going to do with the Eruptor, I knew it was going to be a nerf, and I thought it was going to be pretty severe. And after testing with this weapon against both the Terminate and the Automatons, I will tell you right now, it is definitely nerfed. It is very much noticeable, and it has diminished its overall capabilities throughout the game. Now, we're going to detail out each one of the enemies, or not every single one of the enemies, but the most important enemies that we be taking down with these weapons, especially before on each side of the fight, showcasing how many rounds it'll take now, and some of the methods you may need to use in order to use this weapon going forward, as it will still take down fabricators and it will still destroy bug holes, but beyond that, its crowd control capability has been severely diminished. You'll notice that the damage is now up to 420, and that is the same as the exploding crossbow. And basically, the exploding crossbow and the Eruptor are very similar now. The Eruptor still has moments where it is dealing more damage, or what feels like more damage. It'll definitely take less rounds from the Eruptor than it will from the exploding crossbow in certain instances for different enemies, and I believe that's because of the medium armor penetration. But then there are other moments where they are almost neck and neck with how many rounds it will take, and some of the inconsistent moments as to how many rounds it will take to take down some of these enemies. But that being said, let's just jump straight into it, starting off with the Terminate. And the first enemy we're going to talk about is the Hive Guard, the one with the armor on the face and the legs. Before, with the Eruptor having shrapnel, you could generally just fire this either to the left or right or just underneath the chin and generally be able to one-shot them. Occasionally, you will still be able to one-shot them if you shoot them directly under the chin with this weapon, but if you do end up just going for those headshots, it's still going to be 2 shots just about every time, and sometimes it will be 3. There is a little bit of inconsistency, and I believe it's based on shot placement. Coming up right after that, we've got the Brood Commander, which this got hit pretty hard. If you remember before, the Eruptor was doing amazing work towards Brood Commanders. You'd literally just need to shoot between their legs just below them, and that shrapnel would sometimes completely liquefy that target. Now, you can 2-shot it if you get 2 direct hits to the face, and that'll blow its face off. But there is going to be times as well where you may be hitting the face and it could take upwards of 3 to 4 or possibly more shots. This is where it kind of feels very similar to the exploding crossbow. I'm not a huge fan of this. This feels like a major nerf, and you can really notice the damage drop off without that shrapnel. I was a good bit let down by this moment. And I hate to say it, but the news just keeps getting worse. Now, let's go on to the nursing spewer, the Bloaty Bug, the orange variant. Before, we were able to one-shot with this weapon, and this is one of the more important aspects for me when it came to facing off with the Terminate with this weapon. It was one of the key highlighted features that I really enjoyed about this. Even though I'm not a huge fan of this weapon, I really enjoyed being able to one-shot those orange bloaty bugs. Now, sadly enough, it's going to take 2 shots every single time. And it doesn't even matter where you land those shots. Generally, even a face shot's not going to end up being a one-shot. And then when it comes to the green acid variant with the medium armor, that is now going to take 3 shots every single time. Even if you're hitting it directly into the side weak spot, sadly enough, this is going to be 3 shots each time that you land them. It just feels so much worse having to 3-shot those instead of having them be 2-shot, especially with how slow this weapon fires. I almost feel like they need to bump up the fire rate with this weapon now that they've taken away the shrapnel. But then just after that, when it comes down to the Charger, now this used to be able to one-shot them. There's that shrapnel, if you got that proper one-shot at the very back end of it and you were able to get that shrapnel to all go into that back weak spot along with being able to hit that back leg weak spot, man, that thing would just be that one sweet spot to just completely destroy that thing. Now, sadly enough, if you get 4 direct hits to that back weak spot, and I believe you might need to get closer to one of those legs to encompass it in the explosive blast radius to make sure that one of those legs is getting hit at the same time as that back weak spot. But in 4 shots, you can blow that back end off. Now, I did have other times where there was a bit of inconsistency. It's not as easy to land those shots anymore. You're basically going to have to be pretty precise as to the spots that you're landing these shots with, as you can't rely fully on that shrapnel anymore to go up into the weak spot if you're not exactly pinpoint accurate with this, with getting that direct hit on the weak spot on the back end. You can still shoot from the front and under towards the back legs to get a little bit of damage on that weak spot through the explosive blast, but that's going to be a bit of diminished damage, and it more than likely will take more rounds in that scenario than getting those direct hits to the back end itself. So sadly enough, this does feel very much a bit more nerfed when it comes to facing off with chargers. And it's more than likely going to take a bit more time out of your day in order to take them down. Now moving on to the automatons, we'll start off with the striders. It is still going to take 2 rounds every single time to take down one of these striders. Even if you're aiming towards the top visor, it's still going to be 2 shots. Coming up right after that, we've got the meat saws. These used to get 1 shot by this if you shot them in the stomach, and this was a big benefit to using this weapon, but sadly enough now, sometimes you can get it 2 shot, but generally it's more than likely going to be a 3 shot unless you're very precise with hitting that weak spot on the stomach or trying to get that headshot on top. But most of the time, it's more than likely going to be 3 shots to take down the meat saws now with this weapon. Now let's talk about heavily armored tanks. This was one of the things that I found out with this weapon while I was using it, as you could get to the back end of one of those heavily armored tanks where the exhaust is, and you could shoot up under it, and with all that shrapnel, within 2 shots, you could blow up one of these heavily armored tanks. I knew this shrapnel, this is like one of the defining points as to how much damage that shrapnel was doing, because I got up behind a heavily armored tank, and I shot round after round after round underneath that back end, and it didn't even start smoking. I dumped about 2 magazines into the back end of this thing, and it didn't even end up actually getting much damage at all. So this is a severe nerf without this shrapnel. Now just after that, we've got the Hulk. This one's still going to take 3 shots, and it's still going to be pretty slow. You're still going to need to hit that weak spot. More than likely, you're going to have to, use some type of stun grenade in order to get these shots unless they're chasing a buddy of yours, and it's still going to take just about 24 hours to take down this Hulk. No improvements there even with the explosive damage. And just after that, we've got the gunship, and I'll be honest, this is just not something you should ever try to do. It is very painful. It's about 6 to 7 shots. I'll put the gameplay footage up in the background. I'm not even 100% certain as to how many shots it was, but it was a ridiculous amount of shots, and it's just not worth your time overall. Use some type of support weapon, but in the meantime, if you don't have that, I guess you can get it done with this weapon. It's just going to be really frustrating. And last but not least, we have the Devastators, which is one of the big reasons this weapon was doing quite well, and we were able to get 1-shots on them. You can still get a 1-shot. It doesn't feel like it's going to be as easy anymore. It still feels like it's a bit off with the scope, and there's been more than a few times that I tried to land that headshot with this, and it doesn't feel like the explosive blast damage is getting pushed into that weak spot in order to get it destroyed. So you will basically need it to be a direct hit in order to be a 1-shot. But beyond that point, it's going to take 3 hits to both the Rocket Devastator and the Shield Devastator. And even if you hit them in the crotch, right in the hip joint or one of the legs, sadly enough, it will still be 3 shots to take them down. Now, one thing that I did notice, though, is that you can still hit the shield on the Shield Devastator, and it will still be only 3 shots in that moment. So it will penetrate through the shield that the Shield Devastators are carrying, but in the moment when you hit the shield, they won't get staggered, whereas if you hit direct hit to the body, that's when you'll get the stagger. And for whatever reason, you would imagine that the explosive damage from this weapon would throw or be able to blow off the arms of Devastators, but I did not notice it having this capability. This would have been something that would have been pretty decent to use if that was capable, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just wasn't aiming directly for that arm. Maybe you have to hit a direct hit on the arm, but let me know down in the comments below if you've been able to get this done with this weapon after this patch. But that's going to be all the testing that I've gotten done with this, basically key highlighting all of those enemies that this was actually pretty useful for, or useful to use against back before this patch, and seeing how they changed past the point of actually taking away the shrapnel. And I hate to say it, but it does feel like a huge nerf to this gun. I knew when I read that Discord message where they said this was going to be a buff and that this was actually going to be beneficial for the weapon. You had that gut feeling, like once you saw the bold section where that was the only thing emboldened on the message itself, it just felt like it was a good bit of sarcasm, because this is certainly not as powerful as it was before, and it has been severely decreased in my opinion. Some people may completely put this one down. Now, it's quite nice that it can still two-shot the orange bloaty bug, but I believe it should basically be two-shotting both variants of the nursing spewers. But it is pretty sad to see, you know, I may not have been like the biggest fan of this weapon, but there were aspects to it that I truly enjoyed when facing off with both factions of the fight. And to see them gone now really diminishes the quality of this weapon for me. And I honestly don't think I'll be using this for the foreseeable future right now. But let me know how you feel down in the comments below, and let me know if there's anything that you found about this weapon that I may not have found with my testing this morning. I only went in and probably got about 2 hours with this weapon, basically key focusing on some of those major targets that we used this against before. But if you found anything new yourself, let me know down in the comments below. You know, I'll pin anything that's really important to let other people know and get that information out there for people that enjoyed this weapon before that may give it some saving graces from this. But overall, I'm pretty disappointed with this nerf, and hopefully with the new warbond coming, we can at least get something, or maybe even just revert the change on this, fix the shrapnel thing and just bring it back, because man, this weapon does not feel the same at all in my opinion. It's not nerfed into the ground, but it is nowhere close to what it used to be. But let me know how you feel down in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, hit that subscribe button, and if you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description. Follow me over at Twitch. We'll be streaming daily. But on that note, have a good one.